Hello and welcome to those of you joining us on Lincolnshire Reporter. My name is Stefan Pidluzhny, and with me for the third in our series of live Facebook chats with the candidates standing in the Sleaford North Hykeham by-election is Caroline Johnson from the Conservative Party. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you.
Right, to begin with then, what made you decide to want to stand as a candidate here?
Well, I'm local. This is my home. It's where I live with my husband and family. I'm a local doctor. I'm a consultant paediatrician, so I understand the problems that people face and care about people and want to make a difference.
You've sort of spoken about it a little bit, but what qualities would you bring if you were elected?
What qualities would bring? Well, I'm a local person, so I understand the local issues. I'm a doctor, so I care about people and I understand, and I've been privileged to speak to a number of people from all walks of life, and they understand their
so a range of experiences.
A range of experience, and also my husband's a farmer, so I understand many of the issues affecting rural people and farmers, and I really feel I have a lot to offer as somebody with a real job in the public service.
Sure, yeah. Your campaign's sort of spoken quite a lot about how you're the only candidate who can help deliver Brexit.
Yes.
Just out of interest, how did you vote in the EU referendum?
I voted to leave.
So it's fair to say that you're a true believer in Brexit. Sort of, you hear Theresa May describe herself as a reluctant Remainer. She's probably been converted a bit by now. Do you know what the government's policy on Brexit is? When sort of the Prime Minister says Brexit means Brexit, which she said quite a few times, hasn't she?
Yeah.
What do you think she means?
Just that we, the public have voted to leave the European Union, and we are going to leave the European Union.
How?
Well, I think the details of the negotiations are something that are best not laid out in public. It doesn't help your negotiating hand if you deal all your negotiating cards out on the table.
So it's not about providing a running commentary, as she said quite a few times. Is there a problem, though, that if you don't provide a running commentary, as you're the one sort of in control of the negotiations, that other people will do, people like journalists, for example?
Well, I think the key thing is that we have to focus on doing the right thing for the country, and in particular ensuring that we get the best deal for the people of Sleaford North Hykeham and the rest of the country in the Brexit negotiations.
Is the government's policy to have our cake and eat it?
The government's policy is to leave the European Union and get the best deal that we can with the EU, and this is an opportunity for us to make deals with people, different countries around the world.
So it is in a way then?
It's about making the very best of leaving the European Union, the very best deal we can for people in this country.
Okay. You're a paediatrician, as you've mentioned, which must be a really challenging and rewarding job.
Yes. You
must also be really passionate about the NHS as well, I imagine. A key campaign pledge of leave, and obviously you voted leave, was that the NHS would receive £350 million a week in funding. When can the people of Sleaford and North Hykeham expect to benefit from this?
Well, the people of Sleaford North Hykeham are, with the rest of the country, already benefiting from the extra money that's been given to the NHS.
What about the £350 million a week?
So the report by Sir Stephen before the Conservatives were elected said that the NHS needed extra money. We've actually given them more than that. The key thing is ensuring that we get the very best service from that money, and that the people of Sleaford North Hykeham get the best deal from the NHS.
I understand that. What about specifically the pledge on the side of the bus which said we'll fund the NHS with the £350 million we won't have to pay to the EU?
Well, I think
Is that going to happen?
I'm not in charge of I'm not the Chancellor. The key thing is when we are no longer paying into the EU the amounts of money that we are at the moment, following leaving the EU, then it will be down to the democratically elected government of this country to decide how the money that we have is spent.
Okay.
And clearly investment in the NHS is a good priority.
Possibly not £350 million a week, though.
I'm not in charge of the budget.
Okay.
You need to ask the Chancellor
Okay,
that.
sure. Well, we'll do. If it comes up to Lincolnshire, I'm sure we will do.
Yeah.
Right, moving on from Brexit, but staying on the theme of the NHS, what have you made of the situation at Grantham A&E?
So, Grantham A&E is a very important hospital. It's my local hospital. And, the hospital there has saved my husband's life on 2 occasions. So it's very...
How did that happen?
Okay, so it happened twice. First of all, he had a quad bike accident which was a bit nasty, and then the second time he had a perforated appendicitis.
So you obviously really value the service there.
I do really value the service there, yeah, and I would like to see it reinstated to how it was before they closed it overnight in August from the A&E department as soon as possible. And to that end, they selected me to be the Conservative candidate on a Thursday evening, and by the Friday morning I was meeting in the constituency with Jeremy Hunt to talk to him about the health service in this area, and in particular about the A&E service at Grantham. And following on from that, I was pleased to see that the CEO of ULHT, which is the trust that runs Grantham Hospital, the CEO announced that yes, they will be reopening Grantham Hospital overnight as soon as they have recruited the staff that they need to do so safely, because it's important that it's a safe service too.
Of course, yeah. Who do you think's to blame for the situation there, for getting it to how it is now?
I don't think blame is a useful thing.
Or maybe what else could have been done then, perhaps?
Well, it's not how we got to this point, it's how we go forward from here. And as somebody working as a consultant in the NHS, I understand how services work and things which will encourage doctors to be wanting to work in the area and help us to recruit more people. And that's what we need to do. We need to recruit the extra staff as soon as we can to get the A&E reopened. Recruitment's
obviously a really important thing. What would, for example, a Lincolnshire Medical School actually help with sort of recruiting and training our own?
Well, we actually do train medical students in hospitals around the country. Usually what happens is that they're at a medical school in a large tertiary centre, and that the medical students rotate round various hospitals. So doctors in virtually all hospitals in the country already train people.
But would one in Lincolnshire, for example, be beneficial? Would you be campaigning for one as an MP, for example?
It's something I will have to think about.
Okay, sure. And of course, recruitment's really important, but keeping hold of the people working in the NHS is as important, if not more so.
Yeah.
There's been a lot about the junior doctors this year. They've been on strike quite a few times. Which side do you sort of sit on the fence with that? Do you support the junior doctors, or I imagine I know the answer to this already, or do you support what the government's done, and could the government have done more perhaps?
Well, there was some dispute, and we need to remember that doctors do a very difficult and challenging job and do all we can to support them. And my understanding is that the industrial action has now finished.
Okay, sure. On to transport, which is another really important issue. I'm sure you've heard it a lot on the doorstep as well. Transport Secretary Chris Grayling came to Lincolnshire last week, came to the constituency to encourage Lincolnshire councils to submit, I think it was called tangible proposals for road improvements, road schemes.
Yeah.
He's also confirmed funding for the Lincoln Eastern bypass, which is really welcome news this week. What other schemes, especially ones in the constituency you want to represent, do you think need to be brought forward?
Well, I think the other scheme that I understand is being brought forward, which will be really, really helpful, is actually a scheme to improve the junction at the A1, A17, A46 just in Newark. Now, this is not within the Sleaford North Hykeham constituency, but clearly is a gateway into the constituency, and I think improving that will really help traffic flow.
Absolutely. How about things like the Southern Bypass around Lincoln,
which bypass
obviously covers your constituency?
Yeah, again, another important issue that, if I was elected, I'd be looking with Carl McCartney as MP for Lincoln, who's also Conservative, to try and argue the case for that too.
Absolutely. How important is it to work with MPs from across the county and indeed the region? Obviously, Lincolnshire, all the MPs are Conservative.
Well, I think that's a good point that you make, because actually, as a Conservative MP, if I was elected, we'd be able to work together as a team. And a team working together is stronger than an individual on their own.
Sure. And we've spoken about the roads quite a bit. What other transport schemes would you like to see brought in which would be beneficial to the residents in Sleaford and North Hykeham?
Well, we've talked about the key new schemes at Newark and on the east side of Lincoln. There's also some improvements going on the west of Grantham, which will help people within the constituency and they not be in it. And then we're listening on the doorstep to smaller schemes around the region that may help individual areas, individual villages.
What about sort of rail schemes as well?
Well, yes, I know there is a rail forum coming up in the next couple of weeks that has been arranged by MPs locally to talk to the rail operators about the services provided and how we can improve them.
How do you think we can improve them?
Well, essentially people want the trains to be run more often to where they want to go, and it's about looking at how that can be achieved.
Do you think that's possible then?
I think it's possible to improve the services. Yeah.
Okay, sure. And of course, the by-election was triggered by the sudden and shock resignation of Stephen Phillips a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Don't suppose he's been in touch with you at all since then to wish you well?
He has, yes.
Has he?
He's messaged me to say congratulations on being selected as the candidate, and wishing me the best for the future.
And were you surprised by his decision? I think most people seem to be pretty taken aback by it.
Yeah, I was surprised, but we're not here to talk about the past. It's about the future and about the election and the future for Sleaford North Hykeham.
Of course, yeah. And you're defending a majority of over 24,000. What would be a good result for you and the party?
Okay, well, by-elections can be quite unpredictable. So we'll be campaigning already hard for every vote, and that campaign will continue right up until 10 o'clock on polling day when the polls close.
But assuming it's obviously to win. Anything other than that would be really disappointing.
Yes, I think so. But we will be campaigning very hard. There's no room for complacency, particularly in a by-election. So we will be working very hard for every vote.
Just to explain to our readers, how by-elections are sort of different to the ordinary parliamentary elections? What makes them so unique?
Well, because they're happening at a time when the rest of the country is not having an election, and so that can mean that turnout is quite a lot lower. It's also happening at a time of year when the weather is cold, the evenings are dark, and that does dissuade some people from going out to vote, whereas general elections are usually held in the spring.
Yeah. And how you sort of touched on it a little bit there, how difficult is it to get people who are perhaps thinking about putting a Christmas tree up or doing the last minute shopping? How important is it, or difficult is it, should I say, to get these sorts of people to actually go out and vote?
Well, I think people are quite engaged in the election when we've spoken to them on the doorstep, campaigning on a 5-point plan with the issues that are mattering most to the people throughout the constituency. And those issues are ensuring that we have good, fast broadband for everybody in the constituency, especially those in rural areas. Making sure that we tackle rural crime, which is harder to detect. Making sure that we support our shops and businesses, and that development of new housing is done in a way that is sensitive to the area and ensures that it has the infrastructure that makes it work. And also, as we've touched on already, making sure that we have good transport.
And finally, how challenging will it be to represent such a constituency? Because areas like North Hykeham look towards Lincoln quite a bit. You touched on sort of areas around Newark as well. A lot of sort of areas in the south of the constituency perhaps looks to Grantham as well. How do you go about sort of bringing all of them together?
Well, I think it's a case of everybody vote is equal, everybody matters the same, ensuring that everyone is equally represented, but also remembering that we have Conservative members of Parliament surrounding us, and so I'd be able to work with them effectively as a team if I was elected.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Caroline. And make sure to watch out this afternoon for the Monster Raving Loony Party candidate, Peter Hill. We've already had Victoria Ayling from UKIP today. Yesterday we had Ross Pepper from the Liberal Democrats. And Friday we've got 5 candidates coming in. We've got 2 independents, a Lincolnshire independent, the Labour Party candidate, and the man from Bus Pass Elvis Party.